Alright, this is a film to wrap up the final kind of details on this project. I wanted to start with this this instruction sheet from the fireplace I was using. All of these wood burning fireplaces require a pretty large diameter flue pipe. In our case, it's going to be, in this case, it's 13 inches with 2 inches of clearance on each side, which means the inside of the chimney needs to be 17, and so the outside is going to end up at 2'2" or so, plus with all the stone on it, etc. Additionally, this here, you can see generally the location of this particular fireplace isn't in the very best location, and you can study this if you like. We're kind of like this here, where it's down low. Our wind is coming from, prevailing wind is going to be coming from this left side of it as you face it from inside the patio. And so in any case, it's going to behoove you and help you with your operation to extend that chimney higher rather than leaving it at the minimum. The minimum is 18.5 feet from the base of the fireplace to the first opportunity of outlet. That minimum actually also covers our code requirement for the roof. So as soon as you get the minimum in, you're already good. But whether or not you want to add an extra couple feet to that, you'll have to decide. It's probably easy enough to come back later and do this if it doesn't want to draw for you. But it is something to consider going forward. For all of these, everything we've done in this next section, we'll call this DRM3. I have modeled this majestic Biltmore fireplace, and you can make alterations and so forth and imagine different scenarios based on this. This has a fireplace opening at the front end that you see in the photos, 42 inches wide by 28.5 inches high. This film is largely concerned with the size and shape of the chimney. Everything else has largely been covered. There's a few other details, the height of these pillars at the corner, whether or not there's an opening through here, a few other minor kind of details, but largely it's concerned with the chimney itself and whether or not we want to do anything besides just a straight up rectangle here. The first thing I did was kind of refine this chimney to its minimum kind of width based on that pipe size I mentioned earlier, which is largely like this. And then I thought that looked a little bit too narrow that way, so at the very minimum, something like this. I don't know what size that is. It's minimum size this way, and then it's so far, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet this way. So this is about where we left off the last time, like this. And for the organization of this film, kind of showing all of the variations from this angle, and then all the variations from this angle, from the other angle, and also a section on what it looks like from as you approach the patio from this side, the inside of it essentially. This is where we left, this is where we last were, and the only thing real quick, whether or not we want to make those columns a little more, those pillars at the corner, have a little more power, bring them up another 4 or 5 inches. So now it's a foot here instead of 8 inches. Frankly, that's a personal thing. I probably prefer the higher ones myself, but that's up to you. Now, when I got to this point, the thing that led to this next section of the design review is the chunkiness of this chimney inside here. Having solved all the log storage issues and gotten that all sorted away, I wanted to see if there was, whether maybe this was just a bit too massive inside this space. So some of this is practically approaches silliness, but it is what it is. So after this variation on those pillar heights, and that happens throughout the film because I guess I didn't decide it should be one way or another. And along with that, and this will just occur a few times in the film, is whether or not you wanted an opening on this end, and you can see it open up here. Whether you wanted that opening on this end, and if you did, where along that wall, etc. And here's your high and low pillars. So in terms of reducing the mass of this chimney, first I tried something which is probably not even viable, considering that it's going to be cultured stone, but it's kind of a style that's often used with these craftsman style columns. It's not as if your house is a craftsman style house, but the columns are craftsman style. And so I had horsed around with creating a tapered chimney. Rich will cringe, but since I had already done it, it has been included. And so you'll see it in some of these variations. So it's probably going to be ignored. You can just see it taper there. And that taper is just to match the taper of these chimneys, or these columns at the corner. Next to, again, remember the whole focus was reducing some of that mass from inside. And it's probably just fine as it is, but as I said, this has been done now, so we may as well run through them. And this was the next kind of thing, traditional offset of the upper chimney, which doesn't need to be as large as this lower chimney. So it's like this. Whether or not that cap can even come down a bit, you'll see from inside. And finally, whether that it actually becomes larger than it needs to be by about 4 inches here by poking that out. And that just, it really kind of defeats my purpose, but it's adding mass at the back end and adding texture to this back end. Next, I just reduced the front end of it and have this large upper shelf or high mantle or whatever you want to call it in here, right here, with variations in the column heights again, pillar heights. Then I have that same, watch the upper chimney get smaller still because I offset it in both directions, just at the front and the sides, leaving the back alone. And here's the final kind of variation. I think this is called M, where these come like this. This could probably have benefited in terms of review of having this back wall again bump out the additional 4 inches. But this wasn't one I particularly cared for, but I left it in again because it had been drawn. And we come around to this side and we start again from the beginning. And at the end of these I'll run them through individually and spin each of them individually. This was where we left the last time we had a meeting or film, and this is whether we bring those pillars up a little bit more. I kind of like them high again, but that is up to you. Alright, and again to this tilt chimney, the view is going to change slightly here, and you're not even going to be able to really pick it up. But again, it was made, so I showed it. This is a tilt chimney with the high and low pillars. This was based on this sort of a craftsman thing, and you would end up with something like this. Then we go back to J, which is this offset chimney with high and low pillars and a bump out at the back. It's not required at all, particularly considering how many people are going to be able to actually see it from that angle. This is the one with just the shelf at the front end, the high chimney at the high mantelpiece at the front end. We'll see that from the inside in a moment. There's the high pillars. This is the one that does the front and wraps around the sides, L. And finally M with just the tilt offset at the front and sides. By the way, this is what the standard one looks, the first one, which was the FG H, I suppose, from inside. Just this is really kind of random. Now, this arrives us at the view from the outside. Right, this whole third review or third design review film really arose because of what I felt might be unnecessary mass in this chimney in the inside, particularly in juxtaposition to these columns. These columns could be made non-tapered, but then they'll probably become kind of a little too small looking where they interface with these pillars down here. So I did not bother to change these corner columns at all. But this was where we had ended off the last time, and it was a case of whether or not we raised these pillars up. And this was 8 inches, I think, from here to surface was 8. This just adds a little bit more to that, and this becomes 12 inches from surface to surface. But in terms of this upper part, again, there's that tilt chimney I talked about. It doesn't really do much. And again, it's probably just confusing, but we'll just move beyond that. This was the one where we reduced that upper with this drop down. That's going to be probably J. How much we can get away with dropping that. These are the columns coming up, or the pillars coming up. And that's that back wall bump, that extra, unnecessary extra 4 inches. I did a few other photos on this one. It was one I felt was more viable than some of the others. And then moving on to this, this is the one that has the shelf that wraps the sides and the front. Getting a little more power here, a little less thickness. This is the one that's just at the front. And this is probably, I think this is about 12 inches from the surface of this stone to the front lip of this ledge here. I thought that's probably a bit too much, and I'm not sure about this at all. And this one is the 3 sides with a tilt cap, and that is about it on that run through. Now I'll just run through each of these in their own folder. One thing I did want to mention, that patio may be a little small for the scale of this in here. Only you can determine that, but whether it's like that or not. But here is where, I'll try to go through these one more time now. And this is just, I'm going to rename this one I and skip the one with the tapered chimney. So this is I, and this is with various pillar heights or wall breaks. Still I. This is I inside, and all the other expiration came about because I felt that this was a bit too much mass up here. And so this J endeavored to reduce that. All of them endeavored to reduce that, but this was one of the first viable attempts. Whether that's in or out, I think it's fine in. Doesn't need to be that big. That's large enough for it there. I do like the higher, these higher. That was just, I think that's at the point I discovered you need to come up that far just to meet the chimney or the fireplace manufacturer's specifications. This much is enough to meet code requirements. That's for the fireplace makers' requirements. This is that inside J. Here's K with just the ledge at the front. Those two are also Rands. So that was K. Brings us to L, which takes that ledge and wraps it around the sides, albeit not as wide as it is at the front. L. And finally to M, which uses a tilt transition at the front and sides. This is kind of a traditional look from the back side. It looks similar to J, but this stops at the back side. Now I realize I've probably overdone this whole thing, but what can you do? It's already been done. So following this is an unnarrated section that just has film of each of these, and it's got a label down in the corner of each portion of the film, but it's otherwise unnarrated.